Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dalika Steele with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner. This is the second meeting of the Obesity Treatment Analysis Advisory Group. I want to welcome everyone and thank you so much for being here today. Can you move to the second slide? Okay, so as a reminder, the advisory group meetings will be recorded and posted on OIC's website. OIC's established a webpage for the advisory group where the meetings and the presentation materials will be posted. Well, we also plan on posting Zoom links for the meetings a week prior to each meeting moving forward. Please use the raise hand function or chat to pose any questions. Um, Today's meeting is scheduled for 90 minutes, but I don't think we'll need all of that time. Next slide. So, okay, so the purpose of today's meeting is to update you on the current status of the project, provide more information on WISIP's approach and the literature review process, then open up discussion for any thoughts or questions you all may have on what was shared or on the project in general, and then we can discuss next steps. Next slide. So as a refresher, we're going to be meeting periodically for the next 2 months until July 2026. The draft report is due to IC and will be shared with the advisory group members in July. The final memo and slide deck from WISIP will be shared in September. The final report from Milliman in September as well. And then the report to the legislature is due on September 30th, 2026. So both Milliman and WISIP analyses are currently in progress, and we're still on target with the work plan deadlines. If we need to make any changes to the timeline, we'll update the work plan and share that with all of you. So for more details on the status of the Milliman analysis and where they are in the process, I'm going to hand it over to Casey.
Great. Yeah, we are on track as mentioned. We have started building out the model, doing population estimates, and doing our literature review in order to inform our assumptions and our methodology. We are still currently waiting for the carrier survey results. I believe that should be coming soon. And then we're also waiting on access to the all payer claims database, which should also hopefully be resolved in the next couple of weeks. I don't foresee any delays in those two items having an impact right now on the timeline of the paper. Would you like me to go through the methodology that we're using for the literature review?
Yeah,
Do that
yes.
now? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have two different streams of literature review going on. There's a clinical literature review that's to help inform the methodology. And then we also have a supplemental lit review that is helping us find some assumptions that aren't non-clinically based. So the clinical review is done by clinicians. They're not able to join us today. But they are looking at peer-reviewed literature on cost savings associated with weight loss, the effectiveness of the interventions, and what happens when they're achieving certain weight loss thresholds. So more than 5% or more than 10%. And what the adherence to those interventions are. Their sources are from, they're looking on Google Scholar and PubMed. They prioritize literature for interventions that have more people involved in those studies, and unless there's like an older or less populated study that was better. And so they not including non-peer-reviewed literature or abstract-only publications in their data here. The other thing, like, well, this wanted to mention too that the systematic review would typically include all of the published studies on a subject that met certain criteria. That was beyond the scope of this project. Those types of systematic lit reviews could be very time intensive, and the focus of this is going to be on the actuarial analysis. So they did a modified lit review, and they're relying on their clinical judgment to decide which studies to be included. Some of the factors that they include or thinking about for their inclusion is like the study design and considering whether um, when evaluating the validity of the study results. Um, but sometimes the interventions have sparse or outdated evidence. And so, they, in terms of well-designed and peer-reviewed studies and studies that reported results in a way that is usable for what we're trying to do. Um, for the secondary stream, this is to, supplement like the clinical outcomes and things of that nature. It's more focusing on assumptions that you wouldn't find in peer-reviewed literature. It's something uh, like the number of people who are purchasing um, GLP-1s outside of their insurance. So that would be we have to rely on more like gray literature for that. I mean, we try and see if there's anything that's published, but that's a lot harder to find. Um, and when we're looking in this, in what is available, we're trying to find things that have larger sample sizes. If there are a lot of papers that have small sample sizes, but are like a very specific population, but they're all generally in agreement with each other, then we would include those. But generally, we're looking for larger studies. And then we're also considering the strength of study design in general. So like a pre and post study design would be weaker. Um, like a longitudinal study with an appropriate control group that would be more preferred. So these are just some of the things that we're considering when we're going through this process. You see a hand?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. This is Greg Daniel from Eli Lilly. I remember in the last advisory group meeting, there was a brief discussion around whether or not you would consider white papers if they were from reputable academic sources. And so, like, there were a couple of white papers that come to my mind from the USC Schaefer Center with Dana Goldman and Darius Lakdawala, where they use the future adult model, which is a well-published microsimulation model, and they looked at um, future spending implications and other economic implications for covering current modern anti-obesity medications. That wasn't published in a peer-reviewed journal, but they did publish it as a white paper. And so I wasn't sure if that would be one that you would deem as like from a credible source that would be useful, or it sounded like you were saying that the Milliman team was not including white papers.
Yeah, I mean, we are more for this like gray literature when we need to. So, I mean, we're definitely looking at the peer-reviewed literature first. In cases where it's not available or there's you know we need to further evidence of something, like we are looking at those white papers. So the clinical team though is trying to mostly rely on peer-reviewed literature for that component.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, so I think looking at peer reviews articles is probably the best approach for something like this. So kind of in, really support that kind of the materials. I will look, however, if there are white papers like that, I think it's important to look at the source of the funding too for such papers, not just the institution who published that paper.
Definitely.
Because funding makes a big difference in terms of what questions are asked and how the answers are presented.
Yes.
Any more questions for Millman on this? Okay, so if not, I'm going to hand it over to Morgan to kind of go over WISIP's approach.
Thanks, Leica. And thanks that I'm a little late to this meeting, so thanks for being patient while I got my kid from school. I thought I would first kind of give a little more background into who WISIP is, if that would be helpful. It seems like the folks on the call are more familiar with Milliman and the work that actuaries do. So I thought maybe a little more, just like a couple minutes to talk a little bit more about WISIP would be helpful. So I'm going to start off with that, and then I'll talk about the work we're doing in this project. So just a really brief overview. WISIP stands for the Washington State Institute for Public Policy. We're a nonpartisan public research group in Olympia. We're not epidemiologists or we're not actuarialists. We're a team of multidisciplinary researchers that we conduct applied policy research on behalf of the state. So our mission is to carry out practical, nonpartisan quality research on issues of importance to Washington State. We conduct research in a variety of fields: education, criminal justice, children's services, health, government at large, and transportation. We typically get our projects through the state legislature via a budget or policy bill, or through contracts, which is how this work came to us. And then all of that non-legislatively directed work, like this project, is approved through our board of directors. That board is made of equal representation in both the House and Senate and across both parties, as well as having representation from higher education institutions across the state. So that's sort of who we are. And then part of the work we're known for doing is what we call our benefit cost work. So WISIP has an internal model. It's a cost benefit or benefit cost model. And what that model does is, for a wide variety of programs touching on all the types of research we get, calculates the per participant dollar value of offering a program to the average person in Washington State, to the average person in whatever the target population is for that program. So to do that, we use a general formula to get at a net present value for offering that program. That takes into account the estimated amount of change in a measurable outcome times how much that outcome is worth in dollars, in net present dollars, and then also subtracts the cost to implement that program. For this work, we are doing what's called a benefits only estimation. So we're omitting the cost of the various treatments, and we'll just be computing a per participant benefit, monetizable benefit. Those estimates are produced for each year that the intervention is expected to have a measurable effect over a participant's lifetime, or again, the average participant. And then we back that out into a net present value for the lifetime effects. So that's sort of like the final result of what our work is going to be. To do that, first, sort of mapping on to the phases of work I sent out and we went over in the first meeting. We first scope the work. That's phase one. That part we've already done. That phase one scoping is, what is this project? What are the research questions? What databases are we going to search? How are we going to do this analysis? Phase two, where we are now, is the literature search and screen. So first we do a search of the literature. We created search strings and we gathered the initial literature. That part has been done. Now we are on to screening the studies that we've collected in that search. And then we'll move on to the analysis, which is coding those studies and calculating an effect size for each outcome that we can measure, inputting those effect sizes into that internal benefit cost model that I talked about, monetizing the outcomes that we call monetizable, meaning our model is set up to create a value for, And then we run Monte Carlo simulations to compute estimated monetary benefits of those interventions for each outcome. I am not prepared today to give specifics of our work. So I'm not going to be able to go over the exact search strings that we're using or the databases that we're searching or the number of studies we have in each bucket right now. That all will be in our final report. I'm just not ready to speak to it today. Today, I want to give a high-level overview of what this current step in that we're in is, so the literature screening, and then do my best to answer any questions you all have about our benefit cost model specifically, because I feel like there'll be some questions there. So first, we created our search strings to collect and inventory the initial studies. We're looking at both peer-reviewed academic literature and gray literature, like white papers. Those search strings include keywords specific to our research questions, and the research questions for this project, which were taken directly from our contract scope of work, are: what is the effect of these in-scope interventions on obesity, diabetes, and other related outcomes? So the in-scope interventions are bariatric surgery and all the various types of bariatric surgeries. If you want, I can put in the chat the exact list that we have. And then the FDA approved weight loss drugs. And again, I can put that list in the chat if you'd like. The final in-scope treatment that we have are behavioral and lifestyle treatments. That's a really broad bucket. So far, we have narrowed it to intensive lifestyle treatments for individuals diagnosed as obese. Yeah, I can put those in there. Let me just.
Would it be helpful if we also just sent this out over email to the group as well?
Yeah, I could send this list over email.
Yeah.
That didn't copy as
Thank you.
as I don't know, nicely as I was hoping it would. So for the behavioral lifestyle treatment bucket, we've narrowed it to intensive lifestyle treatments, which matched the legislative language that was behind this contract. But these papers report various levels of intensity. One common guideline I've kind of seen is, for instance, at least 6 months of lifestyle intervention, which includes reduced calorie, increased physical activity, and behavioral therapy with some kind of maintenance program. We haven't settled on what the exact treatment definition will be for lifestyle treatments. So we would welcome any guidance as far as how to narrow that down if the group has any, specifically coming from like that clinical expertise. So, okay, for those three, bariatric surgery, the weight loss drugs, and lifestyle treatments, from those in-scope strategies, we created the search strings. Those search strings led us to this initial pool of literature. And now we're conducting the screening for those studies. So our research team is going through each paper individually and only moving forward those papers that are truly in scope. So inevitably, our search strings, even as great as our keywords were, turned up some literature that did not actually talk about the treatment that we're concerned about. Those sorts of things we've removed from our screening and passing forward those that are actually in scope. Once we're done with that phase of screening, we'll move on to a more in-depth analysis of the quality and rigor of the research. And in that phase, we'll look for things like was it an RCT or is it just an observational pre-post study? At that stage, we're not necessarily kicking out studies that were less rigorous, but we are making note of it. We're also looking at, did they have insufficient control variables in their methodology? Is there a comparison group? Were there other factors that could methodologically bias the results? We're also going to note things like, was the author of the paper connected with the, a funder of the drug or something? Those sorts of things will be noted. We'll also make sure that the paper itself includes sufficient detail that we can code it and transform the results in the paper into an unadjusted effect size that our model needs to eventually do the monetization. Things that hopefully won't be an issue, like total number of participants and standard errors, those sorts of quantifiable measures. In the email where I have the list of all the really specific in-scope medications and all of that, I'll include a link to our technical documentation. It's also publicly available on our website. And that document is very in-depth and goes into all the formulas we use to transform the various types of results that papers report into these unadjusted effect sizes, and then how those are further monetized in our BC model. So I don't want to get too into the weeds of that today, but for those interested, I'll send you the link to the document and you can read that over for fun if you'd like. And then any questions I'd be happy to answer via.
And I can just go ahead and drop that in chat if you want.
Perfect.
It is a very long document, so if you need guidance, I'm happy to help out with the translation of it too.
It really is. Great.
Yeah, thanks for that quick overview. It's really helpful. I just have a general question around, I'm looking at the drugs that you have on the list in the chat. Obviously, they range quite significantly in safety and effectiveness. Does the model, will the model use average effects across the drugs, or do you do effects within each drug in terms of what the benefits will be?
Yeah, that is something that we could use guidance from the group on. I'll say, if there's sufficient research on each drug individually, theoretically, we could look at each one individually. We could look at semaglutide versus tirzepatide if there's enough research in each of those individually. If they're similar enough, then we could combine them together and have a greater bulk of research for like a bundle of medications if they're similar enough.
Yeah.
But the model isn't, we don't necessarily have to do one or the other at this point.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. And I would say that even within that list, the more modern GLP-1s have somewhat more similar, but very different benefit profile than like orlistat and some of the others. So even if there were like larger group, not drug by drug, but larger groupings that made sense from a mechanism of action perspective or class, that might be useful.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I'm going to make a note of that.
Morgan, are you still?
That's all right. That was all I had prepared.
Okay. Does anyone have any more questions for Morgan on this? Or any comments about what was shared? Yeah, so like Morgan mentioned, we can send like this information over email. And I think would it be helpful for the group to, I guess, send you thoughts? Okay.
Yeah, we would welcome any thoughts or feedback. Our the way that we collect literature, review the literature, code all of that is very systematic. So things like if there are studies you all know about that you want to send to us, we probably won't be able to use. But uh, but feedback generally, I'm happy to receive.
Yeah, so if there are no more questions about the literature review process or either Milliman or with this approach, then we can discuss next steps. So our next meeting will be held on April 3rd at 3 p.m. The goal of that meeting will be to review Milliman's actuarial assumptions that will inform their actuarial model. These assumptions will be shared with the advisory group 1 week prior to that meeting so that everyone has enough time to review them and is prepared to discuss their thoughts. If there are no other questions about the project or our next meeting or anything, I can wrap it up here and give you guys back an hour of your time. Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you all for coming to today's meeting. Um, I'll follow up with Morgan so that you guys are able to receive all this information. And I will see everyone on April 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.